everybody, Ty here. Hope everyone is doing well. Quite a storm that we had recently here. About 3 inches of snowfall in Atlanta. Most of that coming within the course of about 2 hours, which was really impressive. We actually might make a video as to how that all went down, or at least try to go over the science behind that. But in any case, though, the real question we have now is what's next? A lot of things are changing. The weather as we get further along into January, however, there's a chance that we could see a little bit more. I'm not necessarily talking about the deep south, but I'm talking about cold air in general. Looks like on the 6 to 10 day outlook and also the 8 to 14 day outlook, if you look over here to the left, on this temperature outlook, there is a major cool down on the way as we get past the middle part of the month here. There's going to be a period where we start to warm up ever so slightly. But the problem is, these are not going to be long-lived warm-ups, and as we even go further along, as we get towards the beginning of February even, as we get to the 3 and 4 week outlooks, you can still see that cold air looks like it's mostly going to be reigning supreme, unless you're out towards the west. Speaking of the west, I haven't talked as much about the fire threat, and I do apologize for that. It's been an absolutely horrible situation, and unfortunately, the critical fire threat does remain over towards LA, unfortunately. We're mainly, of course, going to be concerned about very similar conditions as to what we had before. Winds are going to be strong, maybe not quite as strong as what we've seen, but with dry conditions and strong winds and an offshore flow, it doesn't really seem like we're going to get a whole lot of help in trying to get these wildfires contained here. So we go through the 3 to 4 day outlooks. We do have another critical area that we're keeping an eye on here. Again, this is mainly going to be due to those relative humidities remaining very low and also a lot of dry vegetation, basically fuel for the fire to continue here. So just have to be very watchful, and if you are in an evacuation zone, if you happen to be watching this over towards LA, definitely heed those warnings. Keeping you in our thoughts here, of course, as well. So go further along, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the weather pattern as a whole here. You guys know the drill if you're regulars over here. Got the GFS on the main part of the screen here, Euros to the bottom left corner. I'm going to be operating both of these at the same time here. And here is that next little cold. This isn't really that cold snap, but this little cold snap associated with that system that just came through. Not quite as significant as it was once feared to be. However, as we go further along, notice that trough does still sink pretty far down to the south. A lot of cold air does still come in, just maybe not as extreme as what we're calling for, let's say, towards the end of 2024 and early 2025. However, in each case, we're just going to go right to 105 hours here. And pretty much, like I said, pretty good agreement between the models. There is going to be a point, however, before the 20th, where we do start to see a little bit of ridging come into play as we go to 144 hours out. So by the end of this upcoming weekend, we do get a little bit of a warm-up. There's going to be an increase in maybe some showers and storms here. Snowfall threat's going to start to diminish ever so slightly unless you're up to the north, where we still have the potential for a couple clipper systems. But if we move this further along, we'll go back to GFS here. Here is that big push. Right around the 20th is where you see that mass exodus of cold air begin to come in. And it looks like really no one's spared except for the western half of the U.S., where we have that ridge in play here. Those winds flowing downward off the mountains too. It's going to keep things unfortunately dry for a large part of the western half of the U.S. Euro's in very good agreement with that as well. So anyone that's looking for rain over here, I hate to say it, but it looks like we're kind of out of luck right now. We're still kind of stuck with things as they are. Good news is I haven't seen anything reminiscent of the fire situation that we had that allowed the Palisades fire and well, others at this point to begin here, at least not in the upper levels of the atmosphere. I may get into further details of this in future videos as well, because that was terrible, honestly. But as we go further along, there's another big reinforcing push of cold air here. And this system is one that I'm going to be keeping a close eye on. Keep in mind, yes, we're nearing that 300-hour mark. We're just a little bit ahead of it at this point. But that signal is not just on the GFS. The Euro's kind of showing something similar to it. Timing is a little bit later, but just like with that last system, this does kind of look reminiscent of that. Eventually, as time went on, we kind of shifted into a look that was very similar to what we ended up ultimately getting. So, a lot of uncertainty, of course, at this range, but definitely something that will have to be monitored very closely. Like I said, in either case, by the time we get toward 312 hours out, GFS is showing a stronger trough, but the Euro is right there along with it. So, in any case, we're just going to have to be watchful as we get further down the line, as we get towards the end of the month here. We do start to see some warming up at the end of the month, and I've had a fleeting suspicion about February, but I'm not really able to verify or confirm anything at this point in time, obviously. But the February outlook that's going to be coming in a few days, about 5 to 7 days from now, will kind of could potentially verify a little hunch that I have. But in any case, though, regardless of whether we get winter weather or not, it looks like there's going to be another significant cold push. Could be some very dangerous cold air on the way as well as we go further along here. So we'll finish out this model run. We'll look at the GFS, and then again, like I said, really kind of interested towards the very end of January and into February what could happen. More so on the severe weather side of things, but like I said, that more details on that coming in the February outlook video towards the end of this week. So let's go ahead, go to the temperature outlook at this point, and get ready, because this is where things kind of get a little bit, not really the best way, not really a great way to describe it. I don't want to try to make anyone panic or anything, but we do have to be but again, do need to be aware that these temperatures are not going to be anything to mess with. We have the Euro here again on the bottom left corner, GFS, on a very similar trend in comparison to the Euro at this point. As we get to 111 hours out, I mean, you could already see that we're going to be dealing with a lot of cold air as is. Make no mistake, it's going to remain cold over the eastern half of the U.S. in particular. And it's not like the western half of the U.S. is extremely warm either. Even where the wildfires are, we're typically averaging about maybe 65, 70 degrees here. It's not like we're seeing anything out of the ordinary here. It's just extraordinarily dry and extraordinarily windy, or at least that's what it's been. Now, as we go further along here, as we get to the 20th and beyond, here we go. So this is around the 19th, 20th, 20 to 30 degrees below over towards the Dakotas. And unfortunately, that cold air does begin to really make its push into the Midwest here and into the deep south here. We could see some pretty significant low temperatures, especially with this as we go further along into the month here. And the Euro's right along with the GFS at this point. Takes just a tad bit longer on this model run, but by the time we get to 264 hours here, comparison, actually Euro's a little bit colder. Takes a little bit longer to kick in. But in either case, though, you can see those dangerous temperatures starting to really come into play here as we get towards the Midwest and even into the Ohio Valley. You are not exempt from this at all. So we go further along here. We're going to go 282 all the way up to about 300. At this point, we do have a little bit of ridging coming into play. Then here's our reinforcing cold air for a brief period. And then we're kind of just jumping back and forth at this point. Get towards the tail end of January again. I'm really curious as to what could come of that, because I do notice a little bit of a warm sector in particular on the GFS at this point. But by the time we get past Euro range here, this 366 hours, of course, so not a lot of confidence to be had, but it's something that I was kind of reading up about in regards to a tornado forecast. Again, not gonna divulge too much in the way of details there, because I can't even confirm or deny whether this will happen or not. But based off this run, it just kind of aroused my interest a little bit. Another thing that also kind of aroused my interest is the fact that my own area is going to see 11 degrees potentially, according to the Euro run, as we get towards the 26th. So again, very frigid air still expected to come in here. So last but not least, we'll go ahead and take a look at the precipitation models for right now. Don't expect a lot at the moment here, but again, the further out we are in regards to range, all I can say is that the potential exists down the line for maybe more winter weather, maybe making its way further to the south. A lot of other variables go into that. Like, for example, with this low pressure that we had that produced our southern snow here, we had a low pressure that formed over towards Mexico and a secondary low that kind of popped up towards the Gulf. So we got our moisture, and the cold air was already in place at this point. So once we got that, the rest was pretty much academic at this point. But as we go further along here, GFS really is kind of staying quiet, especially as we get a little bit of ridging coming into play into the eastern half of the U.S. here. So we're staying above freezing at this point, so eventually the snow is going to melt, don't worry. But then things start to get interesting as we get towards the 18th and onward here. This is the morning of the 18th. Deep south isn't really of concern right here. A lot of the wintry precipitation stays more towards the northern states, which is pretty commonplace for them. Little clipper system. But then watch this system here. Towards the backside of this, looks like there could be a little bit of ice for the Carolinas. And then another system maybe following up behind this. And this kind of looks reminiscent. Low forms out way later than expected. But as a result, look what happens on the tail end of this. We end up getting some pretty heavy snow here as we go towards the 20th into the 21st here. And this is going to be accompanying that big cold blast that we have once again. These areas further off to the west here, towards the mountains, maybe even towards North Georgia, could be a point of interest as well. But again, at this range, kind of hard to put a lot of merit into that. But the thing is, though, the Euro's against this actually. So here we are going 192 hours out. This system forms a little earlier with the Euro in comparison to the GFS. And this kind of looks reminiscent to that last storm. Now, if that cold air funnels in a little bit earlier, it might increase the progression of this storm, leading to an outcome very similar to what the GFS is showing. But in the Euro scenario here, especially if the storm is a little bit stronger, there could be a chance of maybe North Georgia, northern Alabama, maybe even northern Mississippi getting into the action once again. This does look like it could also be another system for Texas as well. So a lot to keep track of here. It really depends on the timing of that cold air, really just timing in general. This low pressure comes into play with that as well. So we're going to have to be extra watchful of that. But another interesting thing to make note of here with the Euro's outcome is the fact that there is a very good potential for ice over here towards the North Carolina Virginia line here. So definitely going to need to keep an eye out for that as we go forward. Trends are going to be essential at this point. But based off what I'm seeing here, just looking at this QT chart, this is how we got ice over here towards the deep south. Very similar outcome. Notice the surface temperature here in the red is 28 degrees. But if we see this go up higher into the atmosphere, you can see this pushing off to the right. Usually that means that the temperature is increasing. So as you can see, this is the 0 degrees Celsius line, or the 32 degree line. We're much warmer in the mid levels of the atmosphere, but as we get towards the lower levels, we refreeze. But for the most part, we're expected to deal with very slushy, freezing rain, maybe at times a little bit of sleet mixing in based off of that look. In either case, though, definitely going to be putting a lot of attention towards the Carolinas here, maybe over towards Virginia. Maryland could also end up in this as well, but mostly expecting snow, maybe a transition to freezing rain before all is said and done based off this look alone. Now, go a little further along, we see another weird system kind of pop up over here towards the 23rd, and that could be an interesting scenario in which the coastal regions towards maybe Savannah, Georgia, Brunswick, Georgia, even Charleston, if this scenario plays out, they could get some heavy snow. Meanwhile, areas like Columbia, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, Augusta, Georgia could get nothing. And here's the thing, we're going to move the Euro forward too to go along with it. Euro's kind of against it. Nothing pops up here. So again, a lot of uncertainty with this, but a lot of interesting stuff that we're coming to find here with this brand new model run. So while we're going to have a little bit of a reprieve, don't take your eye off of the weather here. There may be much more to talk about as we get further along here, especially as we get into the 10-day time frame and beyond. So watch that move out. Here's another warming trend. So this is going to help stabilize the weather a little bit. So not going to be too concerned in the way of severe weather in this time frame here. But if this warming trend continues and February starts to act like I think it could act, might have to be watchful of that month. Euro's kind of showing a similar scenario. A couple of clipper systems come into play with this colder look that we have. So bursts of snow could be possible towards the 24th into the 25th as well. Nothing of major significance, but definitely an interesting look. We've been seeing these looks on and off throughout the month here up until that last winter storm. So like I said, a lot to keep track of. Definitely interested to see how things pan out in the long run with this, especially as we close out the month. But in any case, though, pretty much quick summary. Things look like they're going to be very busy in the weeks ahead here. We are going to get a little bit of a break in the action. Cold air is really not going anywhere at this point, so keep the jackets handy and make sure you're staying warm and stay healthy. That's all I got for you guys in this video. It's been Metalhead Weatherman. Take care and have an awesome rest of your Saturday.